Hey everybody, welcome to the Druid card reveals for Whizbang's workshop set. Two things. Firstly, I'm feeling really unwell right now, so if there's loads of cuts and it seems very disjointed, apologies, because I'm feeling really unwell, so... I'm hoping to get through this in one take. And that's the second thing, I want to get through this in one take, so we're going to have to go lightning fast. First thing I need to mention, though, before I go into this, just a reminder, the core set for Druid rotated, and what rotated out and what rotated in. Druid, compared to all the other classes, was hit the hardest by the core set rotation, or will be hit hardest by it. They're losing Nourish, Soul of the Forest, Wild Growth, Lunar Eclipse, and Solar Eclipse, all of which have recently seen play in tier 1-ish decks. Maybe not as much Lunar Eclipse, but certainly Solar Eclipse does. Pounce saw some play in a tier 1 deck as well fairly recently, and even Kiri's somewhere around those, 30 to 35th cards that you would put into your deck, and you're like, yeah, it doesn't quite make the cut, sadly. So they've lost a lot of stuff. Then they're rotating in with like Greybow, Park Panther, which I think is a very good minion, by the way. Jasper Spellstone, Thick Hide Kodo, Oaken Summons, Raven Idol, and Swipe. Swipe is an important one because we were teased as well, and we'll get to the teased card again. We were teased a spell damage Druid based on one of the miniature cards. And that is going to come to fruition, spoilers. So Swipe is pretty important because this was often a finisher for spell damage Druid decks of the past. And again, this is a big celebration of 10 years of Hearthstone, and one of the big decks of the past was like these Malagos Druid spell damage decks, right? I'm giving a little bit too much away. Also important to note that a lot of the Death Rattle stuff has now rotated, or will rotate out when Nathria rotates out. And then there was a few of the token stuff, which was March the Lich King. So there's actually a big cycle of Druid cards. That being said, there's a lot of Druid cards that are really strong that are staying in. So don't get twisted. I think Druid is going to be really strong still. Alright, so Chia Drake was the one that was teased. 4 mana 2/4 dragon. It's a miniaturized one, so when you play it, you get a 1 mana 1/1 version of it with the same effect. Choose one, gain spell damage +1, or draw a spell. Seems rather questionable because Druid doesn't really have a big arsenal of spells. And actually, important to note, Moonbeam is rotating out, so they're actually losing some of their damaging spells. Alright, well, here's spell damage Druid, let's go through it. Bottomless Toy Chest, Arcane Druid spell, weirdly, 2 mana. Discover a card from your deck. If you have spell damage, copy it. Alright, if Druid wasn't, value enough, if they weren't copying enough minions, they can do it even more now. All you need to do is put some spell damage cards in your deck. You can discover cards, it's not minion, it's not spell, it's a card, so you can even get a location, hell. And actually, spoilers, there is a location coming up which you might want to copy with this, so that's pretty good value. You find a card for... It's not even just draw a card, sorry. It's better than draw a card because you're drawing a card that you want. And secondly, assuming you have spell damage, which obviously is the cherry on top, you get a copy of it. So it's draw 2 cards that are cards that you want, and you get 2 of them. That makes sense, right? That's really, really good. Really good card. Now, here's one of my little wrinkles, and I think there is enough support for it, but it's pretty close. There's actually not that many spell damage minions or cards currently in Standard that are available to Druid. They only have Chia Drake within Druid. Spoilers, there's some more cards coming up. And in Neutral Land, it's only Kobold Geomancer and Blood Mage Thalmos, I believe. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the other spell damage cards are all rotating out. And I don't see any spell damage rotating in, probably because of Druid. So it's a pretty small pool of guys you can put in your deck, and Thalmos is legendary, so you can only put one of them in your deck. It might actually be that you end up putting something like Joymancer Geppetto in the spell damage deck just to jump the gun a little bit, to get this mini back again as another playoff, because a 1 mana 1/1 gain 1 spell damage is actually really, really efficient, so don't be surprised to see that in this archetype. It would also bring back Thalmos, which is why I've shown it on this screen, which is, again, pretty efficient. Alright, I alluded to it. New location has just dropped for Druidland. It is a magical dollhouse. Gain spell damage +1 this turn only. You get 3 uses of it. I've actually put nothing else, I believe, on this page. It's just pretty good, right? 1 mana, you gain 1 spell damage, that's efficient. It's only for that turn, that's fine. You probably only want it for that turn anyway, because you're going to be some sort of combo deck. And you can do it 3 times, so you don't have to go for this big OTK deck. You could chip them down, maybe set their health to like 20 instead, and then go for an OTK from there. Yeah, certainly spell damage, Druid is going to be a thing. This will just be in the deck. It's just a guaranteed. And it also combinates my brain. My brain is sick. It combos really well with this card. Woodland Wonders. 5 mana. Summon 2/1/5 Beetles with Taunt. Costs 3 less if you have spell damage. Excuse me? I think this is a nod back to Spreading Plague, which I believe, and this was a little bit before I was really playing Hearthstone, but I seem to remember facing this card. I think it used to be 5 mana, but was just giga broken, so they nerfed it up to 6, right? Maybe they even nerfed it up to 7 and brought it back to 6. I can't quite remember its life cycle, but anyway. Your opponent, your aggro opponents, they would play this big board of minions, they'd be zooing you in the face, and then Druid would just drop this bad boy on the board, and that was game. Like, you had to break through this big 1/5 taunt wall. There weren't that many ways to hit the critical damage of 5. That's a really, really big amount of health, right, for spells to deal with, or even minions. And it just gave you enough time to ramp into your big giant cards, and then you were just cheating, right, because you built your game for the late game, your opponents built it to play in the early and mid game as well, and you're like, nope, my early mid game was Spreading Plague, enjoy it. So yeah, that was really strong. This, honestly, I would make an argument for it. I know it's capped at 2. I think this might be stronger. If you Dollhouse, and even if you don't use the spell damage of Dollhouse on 2, and you push the button of Dollhouse, that is a 2 mana, 2/10 with Taunt, split as 2 minions. That is 12 stats for 2 mana with Taunt on both of them. That is disgusting. That is incredible mana cheat. So yeah, I think if there's any form of Big Druid, and I think there will still be a Big Druid, spoilers, Big Druid is a thing now, and I don't think that's going to change. This card is going to go in the deck. It is just the aggro killer. This is back-breaking to deal with. And what's worse is, imagine if you get 2 of these in your hand or something, and you Dollhouse on 5 instead. Not even 5, on 4. You Dollhouse on 4, and you play 2 of these bad boys on 4. Well, that's just GG, right? Right? Okay, here's a card that I think, on first inspection, looks really bad, but when you see the full package, you're like, okay, I understand. 3 mana Arcane Spell for Druid. Again, an Arcane Spell in Druid, interesting. Sparkling Vial. Deal 2 damage. Your next card this turn costs that much less. Obviously, the intention here is to give this spell damage so that you're discounting it more than the card itself. So you're effectively playing this card for like 0 mana or -1 mana. Joy. That type of deal. It's Mana Cheat and Druid. Kel Surprise. We do have a card like this currently in Standard. It's in Rogue, though. It's Serrated Bone Spike. 2 mana, deal 3 damage to a minion. If it dies, your next card this turn costs 2 less. So it has got a conditional effect. But Serrated Bone Spike sees a lot of play in Rogue decks, right? And Sparkling Vial is pretty close on that bubble as well. It does 1 less damage, has 1 more mana. But it doesn't have any conditions on it, right? You can just hit this also to the face. It's not a minion. I think that's going to be the key thing about this card, that Druid needs spells that can go face, and this is one of the few ones that can do it. So I expect to see this in spell damage Druid deck. Spoilers. But yeah, obviously if you can start getting this up in spell damage, I think even if you just give it spell damage 1, it becomes effectively 0 mana, deal 3 damage. Obviously that is good, right? That is a pretty good effect. So yeah, I think you're going to be drawing through your entire deck to try and get these Sparkling Vials, comboing it with your other cards that refresh mana or cheat mana, and you're just going to start OTKing your opponent. And what, you know what helps with that? Alonius, 7 mana, 6/6, spell damage +1. Your spells get double bonus from spell damage. Fantastic. Fantastic. So you play your Alonius on the board, and by the way, I think this is a nod back to Malygos, and this was the big thing about Malygos Druid, that you would cheat out Malygos, which was an extremely expensive dragon. Was also pretty understated for its cost. Actually, it's not too bad, though. but had spell damage +5 on it, which is just bonkers, right? And you would just chain off spell after spell after spell after cheating out Malygos, and that was your win condition. So combo players rejoice, combo Druid is definitely going to be back. And it was also here just before, so it really never left, so keep enjoying it. Alonius obviously starts off a little bit weaker than it, but it's still pretty close. It gives itself +1 spell damage, but you can kind of treat it as spell damage +2. But it's 7 mana, but yeah. +3 spell damage for 2 mana, I'd still lean towards Malygos. Where it doesn't quite beat the same way as Malygos, though, is obviously that each spell damage now scales for 2 instead. So if you've got the location on the field, for example, and you proc that bad boy, then suddenly Alonius is +4 spell damage, effectively, for your spells. On a 7 mana card, now we're talking. Now we are talking. Okay, sure. What are the spells that can go face? Because obviously this is a combo deck, it's going to go face. Sparkling File is one of them, and I definitely think that will be in the deck. You will play your Alonius, you'll play your other spell damage minions, your spell damage location, and you'll drop a file into a file, and they'll both obviously effectively cost 0, into a living root, into a swipe, into a living root, into a swipe, you get the deal. And you're going to do disgusting damage to your opponent's face, so enjoy, people! This is going to be the next look of Druid. You were happy having beetles charging you in the face. No more beetles, they're rotating out. Instead, they're just going to hit you in the face with spells instead. No minions here. No taunt protection. Yeah, enjoy. Also, as a reminder, Malygos the Spellweaver should still be in the core set, so this is also another way of fueling your hand to make sure you have all of these spells in here that you want. All you just need is mana cheat, and it's not like Druid has access to a lot of mana cheat, right? Oh, in Smalland, 3 mana nature spell. Reduce the cost and attack of minions in your deck by 1. Okay, my brain is too full of sickness right now to fully appreciate this. But if I go by my gut, which right now is like churning, if I go with my gut, this card I think will be, currently from all the revealed cards, I think this is the strongest card that has been revealed. I haven't quite figured the way of breaking the game yet, but it's almost certainly going to lead to a game break, right? Anytime you get these mana cheating cards, the combo deck enjoyers, they salivate, right? It's a Pavlovian response. And normally this is just discounting stuff in your hand, so you have to have the prerequisite of drawing it into your hand to do the thing. And Smalland goes for the deck. Reduce the cost and attack of minions in the deck by 1. That's insane. That's going to enable some really, really strong combos. Now, the only, key, critique, I suppose, of the card is his deck is not hand and deck. So, if you're trying to rely on drawing a certain combo piece with your hand, and let's say, it's a 14 mana combo normally, but you need to ensmall in 3 cards, and then you can sneak into the 11 mana range. Obviously, if you ensmall after you've drawn one of the pieces, then you can't do the combo. But I think this will be just enabling, and obviously you can have 2 copies of this in your deck to kind of mitigate that somewhat. But I think this will start enabling these combos that you couldn't do unless you had 12 mana or 13 mana on a turn. And again, I've just not run through all the permutations because there's so many. Druid is mind-breaking right now. There's so many things you can do with this. Just as a reminder as well, this is a nod to Embiggen, which kind of did the reverse. Minions cost 1 more and they got more stats. But I think in small it's better than Embiggen. Possibly as a nod as well, this is 3 mana, so I guess the Hearthstone dev team agree. Other things to note, this is very similar to the effect of Incanter's Flow, which kind of went crazy with Deck of Lunacy. I think it was Deck of Lunacy, right? Way back when. You would just reduce the cost of all spells in your deck. You'd eventually play Deck of Lunacy with just spells in your mage deck. It was just Spell Mage? I can't remember what they called it. Only Spell Mage. And you would just do a fun lottery of spells. And yeah, Incanter's Flow saw some play in other decks as well. And I think it was eventually nerfed. I don't think it originally was 4 mana. I think it was 2 at one point. Maybe it was 3 at first. But anyway, and Small is coming in 1 less than that, and it's basically the minion version of the Incanter's Flow. Now, obviously, you might be going well, you lose 1 attack. Yeah, but 1 attack is worth half a mana. So I mean, obviously it depends. It's a bit of a generalization. If your minion only has 1 attack, then losing that 1 attack is obviously a pretty bad thing. But if your minion has like 6 or 7 attack, then, you know, you can lose that 1 attack for 1 mana. That is a good deal for you. So yeah, in small and might enable these combo decks. I think that is what, as I said, the community are going to salivate over. Hell, though, it might even just go into some sort of mid-rangey aggro druid deck where you just drop in small on the board and suddenly you're starting to play. It's almost like ramp druid, right? But you're not ramping, you're just reducing the cost of your cards, but then you can play them with your mana. And you can still ramp because there are still ramp cards in standard. So I don't know. I simply don't know. There's just so many combinations of insane druid cards. It's just going to be finding the line, the seam to the best one. Anyway, I had a little like a go through standard to see what cards I think will break within small, but I don't have anything like concrete down. I can definitely see you reducing stuff like Colifero, the artist, to try and give you, you know, big boards of minions, and Colifero copies maybe the spell damage. Maybe that's a way to get big spell damage. Obviously, ENR getting cheated out by 1 less mana or 2 less mana is very interesting when she refreshes all of your mana crystals, so you effectively get like an additional 2 mana on top of that. I've even put Frey in here. You can start copying your small and your ENRs. The mind boggles. Then Shattered Reflections is still in here, of course. It's a spell, so it won't get discounted itself. But you're increasing the chance with more in small ones that you play that you can combo this onto one of your other combo cards, right? You're just bringing down that mana range to do combo down. Obviously, Leroy Jenkins is returning back to the core set, so I fully expect Leroy Jenkins to be part of this combo. They're going to lose the Beatles soon. Leroy will just take their place instead. 5 mana 6/2 charge. No, not within Smalling. He's going to be like 4 mana 4/2 instead. Part Panther I've put on here as well, just as a note that this is sliding into the core set again. Just as a reminder, Ignis still exists, so Part Panther could legitimately, if you fill the board with your Panthers and they start attacking minions, it doesn't require your opponent to have a minion. And you can put an Ignis weapon on at the same time with Windfury, like, you know, even just the tier 1/1. It may legitimately be a win condition with Button Druid, because the Button Druid cards are staying, right? So that might even go into this in Smallen deck, just to enable you to get these Button Druid enablers out there, than the cards that copy the Button Druids, and you just make this super button and just don't worry about the minions that much. I can see that being a thing. Malagos will probably be in here somewhere, right? And Alonius, why wouldn't Alonius be in there? There's just so much! And also, why not this card? The other legendary, 6 mana 5/5. Sky Mother Aviana. Battlecry, shuffle 10 random legendary minions into your deck. They cost 1. Alright, obviously this is a nod back to Aviana, which just kept breaking the game. Because funnily enough, Druid mana cheat and breaking the game, it's like the top Google search. So this isn't as strong as well, let me rephrase that. I don't think it's as strong as the Aviana effect, because the Aviana original effect was enabling these insane combos, these OTK combos. Obviously, Sky Mother Aviana is not really built as an OTK enabler. It's more built as a value enabler. But we've just had a tier 2, tier 1 deck from the Dragon Druids where they had insane value, and maybe they will add Sky Mother Aviana in it to go even further, even longer into the game. You might start fizzle copying this goddamn thing and getting 20 random minions that cost 1 instead. Wishing well in Tears, by the way. All the hoops and bells and whistles you have to jump through for the 1-cost legendaries from the Rogue. Aviani, just blop it onto the board. And it has 10 stats. Wishing Well has 7 stats, and it costs 1 more mana. Oh, poor Wishing Well. Anyway. People have already started breaking this. I can't remember who I saw. I think it was Clark. Hellscream was doing it. And I kind of had a similar idea with this, that you're probably going to ENR to, you know, refresh your mana. Then you're going to use something like Cover Artist, which is currently seeing play in the Beetle Druid, now that they've nerfed Shattered Reflections like 18 times, so that Cover Artist can copy ENR. You copy ENR, you play the Sky Mother Aviana, that's your 10 mana spent on the refresh, and then you use the cheap ENR to draw a full hand of cards, and surely you draw some 10 mana Sorry, 10 mana. 1 mana legendary cards, right, in that big hand fill. Cool. Alright, but sure that is all the mana cheating that Druid are getting. Nope, Wind Up Sapling. 2 mana, 2/1 tradable, Battle Cry. Refresh 1 mana crystal. Trade to upgrade. I will concede on this one. People saw this first because this is one of the earlier revealed cards. This was revealed at like 10 in the morning. And people are losing their goddamn mind on this card. They're like, oh my god, this is so broken. Oh my god, Druid mana cheat. Oh my god. We have had like refresh mana crystal in the game before. Horn of Winter is in Death Knight right now, and Lightning Bloom was in Druid and Shaman. And for 0 mana, you could refresh 2 mana crystals. Obviously, Lightning Bloom came with the Overload 2 on it, so you're paying for that later on. So this gives you a kind of a rough idea of where Hearthstone value is right now, refreshing 2 mana crystals. It's honestly somewhere around the 0 to 1 mana range. For a 2/1 stat line with nothing on it, it would see no play at 1 mana. So I'm actually going to say this is probably more like a half mana card as just the raw stat line. And you'd probably have to trade this, I'd say 2 times before you start to really break even on it. I mean, it costs 2 itself, right? So if you're playing it on refresh 2, you're basically playing it as a 0 mana 2/1, which is good, but it's pretty minor now for Hearthstone, to be honest with you. Especially when you consider, and this is part of the, or at least I've seen it being integrated in part of the Beetle combo decks. They have Funnel Cake in Druid as well, which is 1 mana, restore potentially 3 mana crystals, assuming you have 3 minions on the board. So yeah, I think this Wind Up Sapling would have to see at the very least 2 refreshes to be decent, but more realistic, you'd probably want this to be like 4 or 5 times refreshed. I think it's just going to be too slow. Also, it's just a note, I think this is a nod to Twig of the World Tree. I'm not actually 100% on this one, which was Death Rattle and a weapon refresh all your mana crystals. Instead of it being like a twig from the World Tree, we're now a sapling that is going to be part of the World Tree. But I don't know, maybe this is just me reading too much into it. We also have Jade Display. Death Rattle, your Jade displays have +1/+1 this game. Shuffle 2 of them into your deck. Alright, well, obviously this is a nod back to the Jade Golem archetype. More specifically, this is very similar to Jade Idol, which was a spell that used to either choose one, you would summon a Jade Golem, or you get 3 copies of the Jade Idol and put them into your deck. And the balancing act was that every time you played a Jade Golem, they would gain +1/+1, right, on top of one another. It's very similar to the Earthen Paladin type archetype. And you had to balance between having enough Jade Idols in your deck to draw them, but playing enough Jade Idols so that your Jade Idols that you play are actually good enough. Eventually, though, the Jade Idol deck did become a thing, and Druid generated these giant dudes. Now, from what I can see, Jade Display is going to get no further support. This is just it. It's also not being given Jade Golem as a tagline. It's got its own thing called Jade Displays. I assume that is for wild reasons. This is simply just going to be too slow. Obviously, 1 mana 1/1. That's no good. Death Rattle is a slow effect. Then 2 of them get shuffled to the deck. It's not even 3, it's just 2. Then you have to draw the next one. You play the next one. It's a 1 mana 2/2. In current Hearthstone, 1 mana 2/2 is reasonable. That is just standard. That is just called playing normal Hearthstone. So it'll take you at least 2 Jade Display destructions to really make any value or any headway into this card. As a note, you may be saying like, oh, well, Death Rattle Druid is still a thing. No, it's not. It's all rotating out with Nathria, so there is really there's no great Death Rattle triggers. This is just going to be too slow. The only way I can see this thing play is like literally as a 30th card into this spell Druid deck. Because I already said that they might run Joymancer Geppetto. Maybe along the line of these 1-cost cards, these 1-attack cards, the 1-health cards. Maybe just drop in Jade Displays to try and get you into this late game. I don't think it'll be a thing. I think it's just going to be too slow. But if Jade Display is going to work, then probably Joymancer Geppetto will have to be part of the archetype. But I think it's just no support for it. Anyway, that is Druid. You may be able to tell by this very clean cut. I was just checking. Tomorrow is going to be the Paladin reveals, I believe. And I'm really, really intrigued to see what they're going to do with Paladin. In part because Paladin is very, very strong right now. And basically any Paladin minion that they release now that is vaguely sticky is going to be really, really, really powerful. So we'll see what direction Paladin goes in tomorrow. My hunch, if you want to, if you want to have an idea of my hunch, I think they're going to go back to 1 attack, 1 health. It was 1 attack, right? Or 1 mana. 1-1-1-1. I think it's going to be 1 Paladin, where they had archetypes before where it was every time you play a 1-cost card, this card gets discounted, that type of thing. So I think that might be the Paladin direction they're going to go with, especially with these miniatures. Anyway, toodaloo.